Hello, this is Shay, security infrastructure engineer, and we're going to go over basically what happened during the summit and how we can prevent that in the future. So basically, during the global economic summer, our country, which is Australia, faced multiple threats that shut down web access and other government websites. Essentially, what we saw is that it was high activity with traffic that appeared very suspicious, and it did interrupt and eventually slow down services that were directly linked to us and the summit. So some of the tools that we did use to investigate this was Wireshark, and that basically is a network analyzer. We used that to determine that it was a denial of service attack. So there were two different types of attacks that happened. It was a UDP flood attack and an HTTP GET attack. So UDP flood attack does exactly what it says. It floods the network with multiple UDP requests until it slows it down or shuts it down. If it does shut it down, then it gives the attacker a window to be able to get information that they desire, such as usernames and passwords, which was also compromised during this attack. And the HTTP GET requests are a type of SQL injection attack. So this would be used to infiltrate a database of some kind, which would make sense since it's a government entity that we're working on. So the web service essentially went down, and then, like I mentioned earlier, they were able to get username and password information with a brute force attack. And this is done on a Mozilla Firefox web service. So basically, to prevent things like that in the future, we're going to go ahead and, my opinion, use an intrusion prevention or detection tool. Basically, those things can be proactive in preventing those type of attacks. In case we don't get to them in time, then they can do something and then we can get to them. Or we can know about them as they are occurring or about to happen and be ahead of the curve at that point. So what we're using right now is Snort. It's an open network detection system. So basically, with Snort, you have rules that are set by the administrator, and if any of these rules are broken on the network, then the administrator or IT specialist gets alert that something is going on with the network. So we have mentioned that it's some Snort rules for the detection system to follow. Basically, mitigating a UDP attack. If something does happen, then we'll get alerts saying that it is a possible UDP attack, and we'll look into that as well. Also, during the summit, we came across a ransomware incident. Basically, employee an HR representative opened up an email link that looked like a billing invoice, and they clicked the link and ended up downloading malicious files to the network that were uploaded to the server. Basically, these files were encrypted and they were on the computer, but we could not access them. So they were different files. So they were critical documents, cyber warfare, international law, cyber pictures, a law PDF document, and Uganda's cyber laws PowerPoint. So basically, what the attacker did is that the files were all encrypted with an AES 256 algorithm, and then within the files, they contained an ID number for the attacker to receive bitcoins. So the ransom was that we had to either give up the system, or they had to pay or we had to pay the attacker in bitcoins to avoid releasing any information or anything that could have been compromising to anyone. So what we learned from this is that we need to do better social engineering training for our employees. Everything that comes through email is not 100% secure. It's important to look at where the email is coming from, because these attackers will mock and use like importing officials' names or someone that you report to names to just have you open up the email and make sure that it looks fine without looking at the email address. So that's important. I think that should be done on a monthly basis because things constantly change in technology. Now, the IP address that we did discover that had sent that information is blacklisted. And again, the SNORT rules will be updated to include any rules about ransom attacks. So they'll include things like ransomware attacks, anything like that to get that information. So that was a little struggle. So it did take about 12 days to go in there and crack the password of the encrypted files to get that removed off the web server. And let's see. So in the debriefing, we also put potential other vulnerabilities that could affect specifically our government in Australia and what their critical level is. So we do have some high critical ransomwares that are being affected. So things like backdoors it's another type of malware. It's important. It's another way for attackers to get into the system. Essentially, this is a way that would be undetected if we're not paying attention to it as well. So some of these things have been mitigated, but other things like the AMD chips, they don't have a resolution for those yet, and AMD chips are very popular in a lot of the systems that's being used right now. And while the summit was happening, we did run into a case with Howard Silver. He was a well-known hacker that had over 100 ransomware cases. So I mean, definitely a person to be stopped this time. So he is suspected in his fiance's disappearance. What we know so far is that he was having an affair with someone named Jenna, and he worked at a landfill. And it looks like that the motive for the killing was for him and Jenna to be together. He's suspected of the killing because of files that we found on his computer that consisted of how to bury a carcass or hide a carcass and how to euthanize agents or get euthanized agents or euthanize someone. So indication that potentially we don't know where his fiance's body is. We could suspect that he still has the body. Seeing that he mentioned in an email to Jenna that he is looking for a way to dump her, which could mean he is going to dump her and break up with her, or that he's going to dump her in the landfill where he works. So that is something that is also being investigated right now, but it is alleged that Mr. Silver has possibly murdered his fiancée and dumped her in a landfill. So what we're learning is that there are multiple intrusion detection tools that can be used to analyze the network. We don't have to use essentially just one. Currently we are using this Snort, and we are using Wireshark to analyze the network, but that is not a proactive thing. That's something that we would need to look at constantly. So we did mention, different intrusion detections. It just appears that, the best option for us is a security onion. Because you can do multiple things and have it set up a way so all different types of IPS and IDS systems work together to prevent another intrusion on the weak network or anything like that in the future. So basically this what gives us VPN security, so workers are not working outside. Who are working outside can log into the network securely using a VPN. That's a risk and possibly something that has failed us because we don't have that type of security right now. It's also important to have two-factor authentication. A lot of the systems that we have to go into are not two-factor. You just log in with your password, and if you have that information, then that's good to go. it doesn't verify anything. This could be resolved with using YubiKeys or Authentic application. Basically, it's another form of two-factor that will verify that you are the person that you say you are. You do have to physically have a YubiKey, and it has to be plugged into the computer as registered to the two-factor, or you can have an authenticator app that's also registered to your login. You would essentially take a picture of a barcode and it would link it to that. So, I mean, basically, we just want to make sure in the future that we are protecting against malware, because it is a big thing that's going on right now in our country. So basically, we haven't lost anything major, and it hasn't been, in terribly bad, but that does damage, our reputation. It does make the government look weak, that we can't defend ourselves, or that it gives opportunity for other attackers to try to attack the government. So basically, we want to keep with making sure that we're staying updated with updates on security. I did recommend that we do get into a mobile device management to manage, these devices, and make sure they do have all the software that they are supposed to have, and not essentially relying on the employee to download or have that information itself. And as I mentioned earlier, we do need to have end-user training on things such as malware, phishing, social engineering, and what those things could look like or appear as. So that's what we have learned so far with these issues that have gone on in the summit. If you do have any questions or concerns, please feel free to email me. Thank you.